one of the players in AAM is the Vertical Aerospace Group, and I'm here with the president of the group, Michael Cervenka. Michael, it's great to have you here. Now, when we talk about your company, where are we currently and where are we going to be in a few years' time? Because some of the things on your website are very, very exciting.
Well, we've had an incredible journey. We've been going about 6 years, but particularly the last 1 to 2 years have been one of sort of exponential growth, ambition, excitement, challenge. We just listed on the New York Stock Exchange last year. We've got an amazing roster of partners and investors, companies like Microsoft, Honeywell, Rolls-Royce, American Airlines, Avalon. We've got, I think, the most high-value order book with 1,350 aircraft all over the world, and a really exciting time for the company. In terms of where we've already flown 2 full-scale prototypes. We'll be flying our first winged experimental prototype this year. And that's really a key learning opportunity to then take us through into an extensive certification program, the end goal of which is that we go into commercial operation in 2025. So by aerospace standards, that's pretty quick, but it's certainly an exciting journey.
Yeah, as I say, 2025, in our minds, it's some way off, but it really isn't. There's only, 3 years and counting. And so you talk about the regulatory thing with sign-off as well. Regulation is such a key part of this, isn't it? Where are you as a company? What do you expect to see change over the next few years when it comes to regulation?
So I think the first thing, we're in a really good place, really focusing on the Civil Aviation Authority and EASA as the initial regulatory framework. And we've chosen that for a couple of reasons. It's the most stringent, highest safety standard in the world, so they're demanding vehicle safety standards equivalent to a commercial airliner. So 1 in a billion failure rate, that's 100 times safer than a helicopter. That's more demanding than the US Federal Aviation Administration is asking for. So by hitting those European standards, we give ourselves a global reach. Actually, we've got really engaged regulators and a really well-defined framework. So in terms of a piloted manned vehicle, we know what the exam question is. In terms of the vehicle, there's more challenge around the operation, the maintenance, the pilot training, but for the vehicle itself, we've got a really clearly defined pathway.
When it comes to hurdles then, when we look at regulation and moving forward, how important is it that the globe is seen with one regulation as opposed to all these different offshoots that are slightly above and slightly below? I mean, you're obviously aiming at the top so you can cover all areas of the world, but how important is it moving forward that the industry sees one regulation as an overriding governing body?
I think it's very important. If you look at aviation historically, there's been really good alignment. So having spent 25 years in aviation, it's quite strange we see this disconnect between the exact rules being set in America and Europe. I think they will converge. I mean, I think the view of the FAA is this is a way of getting the market to start, but as it becomes a mass transport mode, it's going to have safety levels at least equivalent to commercial airlines. I think the bigger challenge is on things like airspace management and operation. And of course, there are going to be different specific operational constraints even within countries, within urban and non-urban areas, different infrastructure and so on. But getting that kind of standardization is going to be fundamental to enabling the mass market opportunity. It's not necessarily a near-term barrier, but if you want to have the full potential of these vehicles to really offer sustainable, disruptive transport that has a really meaningful societal impact, clearly doing that within a sort of global standardized framework is really, really important.
It's interesting when you say sustainable, because sustainable to me, there are many areas, but you either think of, what's it doing out there to our green space, but you also think about sustainable in terms of how do you fund it, how does it keep funding itself, how far can I travel, all those sorts of things. Give us some idea of what we can expect from these sorts of vehicles.
So we'd all love some magic battery that gives us a lot more energy than the current technology enables us to do. And the reality is today, batteries, even those sort of seen to be coming along the line, are not going to enable us to fly a pure battery long-haul aircraft. So carrying hundreds of people for thousands of miles. We've reached that exciting tipping point where an eVTOL, so a vehicle that can carry maybe a pilot and 4 passengers, can take off and land from an existing heliport and can fly up to about 100 miles. But more typically will actually fly between 15 and 50 miles. And will fly over congestion and will even over that range offer really meaningful time savings. And the huge benefit of electrification is it enables us to do that firstly with zero operating emissions, but it enables us to come up with a vehicle that it's not just a slightly better helicopter, it's 100 times quieter in cruise, it's 100 times safer, and it's a fifth of the operating costs. So I think the big difference is we've all dreamt of flying over congestion for a long time. We've now reached the point where the technology is enabling us to do that in a way that most people will be able to benefit.
Now, we touched upon regulation, we touched upon the fact, that it's got to be workable. Being able to fly over congestion is lovely, but what if the skies become so congested? What are they going to look like when we look up into our skies in, say, the next 10 years?
So there's a lot of space up there, and I think this is one of the sort of misconceptions. I don't think we're going to be looking up and seeing, a sky blackened or by aircraft flying over it. And it's going to take time. Our view is we'll start at low rate production. There are only relatively few credible suppliers. We will get up to producing maybe low thousands of aircraft a year, but that's the equivalent to really high-end automotive. We're not going to be producing hundreds of thousands of vehicles. And it's going to take time in terms of public acceptance, but even things like air traffic management and eventually a journey towards autonomy before we see more and more vehicles. But I think of this as, it's an additional mode of transport that is really beneficial in addition to other modes of transport. It's not going to suddenly take everyone off the road and off any form of ground transportation. It's a supplemental transport mode.
Yeah, and that's probably key, isn't it? Now, when we look back at the last couple of years, the aviation industry has had a massive hit. It's had such a hard time. How has this industry, this unmanned or even manned, but the sort of the mobility, advanced air mobility area, managed to keep on pushing forward and not get sort of held up with what's been happening?
Well, I suppose perversely one of the benefits is we're a pre-revenue company, and therefore the implications the pandemic has had on people moving around, obviously from a revenue perspective, doesn't affect us today. I think what we've clearly seen is as restrictions start to be reduced, there is a desperate desire for people to move. So I think we have huge confidence that there is a massive untapped market demand for these vehicles, and we're seeing that. We've got 1,350 aircraft sales. The customers would take our aircraft tomorrow if we could provide them. Actually, for me, it's a really important opportunity for aviation more broadly. Because of the pandemic, perversely we benefit because there is significant spare capacity in the existing aviation supply chains that can be repurposed for these kind of vehicles. And whilst we're only talking about a 5-person vehicle, because of the challenges around battery weight, the level of technology we need is really cutting edge. And so we actually create an amazing opportunity for existing aerospace companies to develop new technologies that they can get into service much sooner than waiting for the next generation larger aircraft. And many of those technologies have applicability to sustainable improvements in wider aviation. So whether it's a level of electrification that can read across to bigger aircraft, more advanced lightweight composites, these are kind of key technologies that will also benefit the broader aviation industry. And from a talent point of view, I think it's so crucial as well. We see a real opportunity working with universities. We've got our first grads. We had 500 applicants for 4 places. We're sponsoring a Black Scholarship program for Black scholars at Bristol University. And so creating that kind of buzz and excitement, I think, is just crucial to that longer term pipeline of attracting people into STEM and into the industry.
It really is a very exciting time to be around, isn't it, Michael? Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure.